We can just watch it through Discord, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Is it on? Can you see the star background?
Yes, I can see the star background.
Okay.
Correct.
So, I am going to eventually change the channel name. I think this weekend I'm going to change it to something more broad instead of just gaming. Because I kind of like my channel to be kind of a catch-all, do a bunch of different variety of things. But anyway, so this video is from a channel called Whatifalthist. What if alt history? It's ran by a guy named Rudyard Lynch who lives near Philadelphia, PA, and he is a history buff, and he had made a bet with one of his friends last year around April that there would be 1,000 political deaths by this April. And he believes strongly that we are headed towards a civil war. And I mean, I am leaning towards agreeing with him because of all of the things going on right now. This video he released today, and it kind of touches on all of the things going on. From what he's saying in the video, I think he made it a couple weeks ago, and it just took him this long to edit it, I guess, or upload it. I don't know, but we'll take a look at it and we'll discuss.
Currently in a historic moment.
Can you hear it?
If you
Oh,
have
wait.
Yes.
Hold on.
Yep.
I need to switch it to.
realized this, but history is actively being carved out now. I decided to stop everything and write this video since I realized people needed an on-the-ground assessment of what's going on, since we currently exist in a moment of chaos in which no one really knows what's happening, and those who know a little tend to be propagandists. Since the Trump victory in the last election, there's been this great question. What is the left going to do about this? The great irony is that the left itself doesn't seem to have an answer to that question. This is very important, since even though they are in mental disorder, the left is still the overwhelming ruling class of the Western world.
Okay.
The left runs the imperial bureaucracy, the United Nations, the European Union, the Catholic Church, major corporations, tech, the media, the educational system, academia, Hollywood, and any other institution you could throw a dart at. Without the left, there's basically nothing left in the Western world, since the right is incapable of creating its own institutions.
I disagree with that. Just to stop for a second. Yes, it's correct. The left control all of the institutions. They've burrowed into them and taken control of them. But when he says the right doesn't have institutions, that is technically correct, because we've started a parallel economy, is what they call it, and now we have our own parallel to YouTube, which is Rumble, parallel to X, well, Twitter, which is Truth Social, but we also own X now, by proxy, since Elon has joined the MAGA movement. And the only thing we really don't have is a true competitor to Facebook. But because Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg have abandoned the left, technically we do.
Well, Zuckerberg's dirty as fuck, so who is he just going to get into bed with next?
Right. I trust him about as far as I could throw my car. However, an ally is an ally as long as they're an ally. You know what I mean? So we'll take it. As long as he's doing his part, he's an asset. And he knows that if he starts bucking the system, it will create a Facebook and ditch him. So, which is what we did with other platforms. Okay, so let's continue.
As of now. This is a video to look at what's going on with the left right now. This video is my best attempt to do it, since I do not have the ability to look into the minds of the left's leadership to see where they're at. I am going to be looking at the media, messaging, and implicit assumptions behind the left today to figure out their next move. No matter what they do, they will be determining history from now on. I spent a lot of time online studying for this video, watching videos and articles, and if you're anything like me, you also spend a lot of time online. One thing that's been super helpful for me, and I know will help you as well, is Surfshark, the sponsor of today's video. Surfshark is a VPN with 3,200 plus unsafe.
Over that.
Click the link in the description, although I cover what the world has to offer. Part 1, Will There Be War? Although I cover a wide variety of topics between anthropology, history, philosophy, politics, and others. However, the thing I've become best known for is my prediction that modern America is on the verge of a political crisis comparable to the French Revolution or the American Civil War. That America is about to experience a horrifying internal war between the right and the left, which will completely remake the current social order, leaving blood on the streets. If you're new to this show, that may sound insane. However, watch my half a dozen videos on the topic if you'd like to hear more. Especially so, my 1,000 deaths bet has gone pretty viral. Last April, I made a bet with my friend Andrew Heaton that America would experience 1,000 politically motivated deaths within the next year. I then said it on Timcast a few months ago, which broadcasted it out. People are taking this way more seriously than I did. I'm actually not keeping a counter, and the number 1,000 is relatively arbitrary. I find people get obsessive over games where you have a pre-established rule structure. The thing is that if America has 1,000 politically motivated deaths, we really have 50,000 or 5 million or 30 million. The way wars work is that when it rains, it pours. Overnight, you go from peace to complete social breakdown. This is what happened in the World Wars, the American Civil War, the Ukraine War, or even COVID. If we hit 1,000, you'll definitely know.
Yes, for sure. And typically it happens during the night when you're sleeping. So you'll wake up and you'll notice the power's out and water's not working. And then you may even hear explosions. So it just happens. And then you're like, whoa, everything's different. And like he's saying, the 1,000 is just an arbitrary number. It could, like right now we're at 50. 50 confirmed deaths that were tied to political events. And it's growing, or potentially could grow. There are a lot of injuries, for sure. Even injuries of those that were trying to cause the terroristic events. They have set themselves on fire, trying to burn Teslas. Yeah.
We are nearly halfway through February and it hasn't happened yet. There's not much really else to say. I was very open for my entire career that my job is betting against God, and I'm very transparent about my fallibility. If it doesn't happen, it just didn't happen. There's not much else to say. I'm not going to fill your mind with useless chatter. There's no need to be children about this. This stuff operates under chance, and the impossible part of predicting the future is the actual timing. It's fairly plausible to get an underlying trend down, but to actually predict when it happens is vastly more difficult. For example, I still think a major war is completely unavoidable. I think it's impossible to get out of the next 4 years without blood on the streets, however and whenever it happens. If it doesn't happen by this April, then I'm going to say within the next 4 years. If it doesn't happen by then, I'll just be objectively wrong. There's nothing else I can say. I see lots of people on my side of the aisle, and I will be open about my biases since they're pretty obvious, and if you don't agree, feel free to take my slant out, where lots of people on the right think that Trump could stop a civil war. I would say we've already seen Trump have 4 years in office. I do think Trump is the best president in living memory, which may sound dramatic.
Because he goes through this pretty fast, so... But even having done all of those things, Trump was in passive mode his first term. He wasn't trying to rock the boat as much as like he is now. Like in his first term, he was genuinely trying to just, one, learn the job, and two, not be known. He was trying not to be known as someone that divided the country, but all the things that he was trying not to do, they knew that he was trying not to do them, so they purposefully instigated things to cause those problems so that they could martyr him, make him look bad, for a private citizen that came up and threatened their career, their political, their career politicians and their stronghold. They want you to think, oh, you can't just come in as a private citizen and do this job. It's so hard, when 90% of them really don't know what they're doing.
But here's a text wall to explain why. However, a competent business mogul can't stop this avalanche. The issues plaguing modern America stem back decades. The reason I think we'll have a war is that the average American exists in a state of poverty today. Due to complex demographic factors that mostly started around 1971, the average American has gotten significantly poorer, the country has incredibly high inequality, inflation has skyrocketed, and there are huge classes of elite aspirant, politically motivated young people who want to fight. These are the factors historians have consistently found cause revolutions or civil wars. Said in another way, there's no historic society that looks like us that doesn't have a revolution. There's about 20 different variables you could study blasting off that say we're about to have a revolution. If you're new to this channel, I purposely kept this segment short in order to not bore the people who have heard this spiel 100 times already. So how does this factor in with the left? Reality is made by a million little choices stemming from the minds of the players. I know the right pretty well, but the left is the other player in the game. Thus, in order to figure out what will happen here, we need to look into the minds of the left to see what their motivations are for their next potential actions. This ultimate question will determine the fate of our civilization. Part 2. Mind migrations. You know, there used to be a time when America was a single country. You could drive from Boston to Los Angeles to see a coherent society where people had similar values, blood, philosophic views, national identity, understanding of their shared history, and income range. That's obviously not the case now. Ironically, globalization and immigration have split different regions of America more apart, while the intention was to do the opposite. Do you guys remember 2010? I think everyone who's watching this should be old enough to do so. For the 10-year-olds watching this, I want to say I am very proud of the mental horsepower you have to be able to understand this at this age. And if society is still functioning when you're older, you could probably become quite wealthy off being so precocious. However, 2010 was an interesting psychological state at complete odds with the rest of the human condition. 2010 was the last point where you could see that unified 20th century myth of America. I'll watch movies from 2010, and it feels almost as if it was a different reality that somehow I lived in. The last time you could see an America that looked reminiscent of The Simpsons or Home Alone. This was a time when Hollywood and Wall Street were seen as Americana. The reason I'm pointing this out is that our society's collective psychological starting point is this time period. The great irony is that this old 20th century America was a lie and completely removed from the rest of the human condition.
Okay. I think most of these we're already familiar with because of recent events. Let me know if you are done.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
This was the era of the blue pill, a society where it was an era which thought that history was over, believed in equality, feminism, progress, secularism, didn't believe in the spiritual, pretended to be Christian but didn't really believe in God, was so wealthy, naive, and many other traits.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
That's very true.
True, but I think it's more of the right sees Christianity as a guide to making society safe and prosperous, not for only the collective but individuals. Whereas the left would like no rules. They would like a father figure that is replaced by the government instead of God, and the government sets the boundary like a sandbox, and then they're inside the sandbox doing whatever they want without consequence. Whereas the right doesn't want the sandbox. They know they don't want to submit to other men controlling them. Only God is who they kneel to, and they follow that path, and that is the widest freedom that a human being can possibly have, in my opinion.
This was all an illusion spun by the enormous wealth of the post-World War II era. It's so remarkable how quickly we've forgotten the entire rest of the human condition. All of human history outside this warm bubble is very different. Hierarchical, religious, coercive, violent, magical, mythic, dramatic, heroic, amongst other things. The problem is that the illusion of 2010, as time passed, became impossible to maintain for a larger and larger percent of the population. The main story of our times is how does one choose to leave the myth of the 2010 era? A major reason I believe we have to have a civil war is that America has become a country where we have different large demographics of the population who basically believe in different realities of the world that have been diverging more and more over the last few years, and these understandings of reality are completely unreconcilable. I am going to split the population into different pills based off red pill terminology, since the only way you can understand the left is to see their own internal emotional journey. A major issue as well is that the society is completely incapable of coming to terms with the fact that the blue pill era was a lie. Thus, different factions have different answers, most of which are frankly incredibly stupid and silly, since the wise and educated older folks who should have brought more wisdom are themselves bought into maintaining the old lie. An important point that I want to say before I get started is that although we inhabit the same physical space as the left, we are not in the same world, if you understand what I'm saying. The word world carries connotations of your entire concept for how reality works, between metaphysics, between philosophy, between your process of just how the environment and human life is, which is why I'll frequently say stuff like the Islamic world or the Western world and that sort of thing. This is a German concept originally. This is a point that I need to emphasize. If you're a rightist, you've gone through an enormous intellectual journey since 2016. I look at who I was in 2016, and I was 15 years old, and I'm in complete shock at how much I've changed as a person, as have my views. The left have been on their own journey, one which rightists don't see. The result of this journey appears as madness to rightists, which it objectively is, don't get me wrong, but it completely makes sense inside the frame the left is holding on to. Let me start with my group, and I would assume yours, the red pill. It frequently feels as if the last 4 years has been God shoving me red pills, saying, hey kid, take another shot and don't throw up this time. I've been red pilled on so many things in such a short time period that I find my old worldview completely incomprehensible and silly. The conclusion I eventually came to is that the pre-industrial world was right on almost everything. That really shouldn't be surprising, given every society ever in history before us largely believed a lot of the very same obvious things, which I show in this text wall here. I don't want to get...
I think it was pretty much the same what he showed earlier. Basically, like, the left wants you to be in conflict with what you know to be true. That's how they manipulate people into giving into things that normal people would consider insane. Like, we protect women, but we're going to let men dress up as women and invade their spaces and harm them. We protect minorities, but we're going to enact things that belittle them, make them think they're always a victim, diminish their education, tell them it's okay to kill their babies so that they can't gain a foothold in the population, that sort of thing. So they tell you one thing and then make you follow the complete opposite.
too far into the right, because that's not the point
Well,
of this
it's kind of like the gender thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that they were actually allowing men to participate in women's sports.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that was not being reported on the news here for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So like when Trump gave his address or that speech or whatever, and to find out that some woman had been paralyzed because she was competing with a male, it's like no, like that should never have been allowed to happen in the first place.
Right. And in his most recent address, which should have been a State of the Union, but since he has not non-consecutive terms, it was his first address of the new term. They had, gosh, what was her name? She played volleyball, and the male that was playing spiked the ball into her face so hard that it caused her brain damage.
Yeah, that's the same one I'm talking about. Yeah, she basically had to lose her entire sports career because of that.
Peyton McNabb. But there's also the boxer, the Olympic boxer, who was also given brain damage. So it is not an isolated incident.
Suffice it to say, the right is currently in the formation of new mental and philosophic breakthroughs. Of all the fields I've been in modern America, and I've seen a lot of different industries, the new right is one of the most creative and dynamic. You do have the Fox News watching boomer cons who still believe the exact same things as Reagan, but they're aging out. They don't even really hold power due to the Trump coup. The right deserves its own video, but the short answer is that everyone on the new right today have all collectively agreed that the 2010 blue pill era was a lie, and they're looking to further in the past to find a new answer. They're on the right, haha, pun intended, path. There are a few other intellectual tracks which I talk about here in this text wall. In the original edit for this video, I had a 10-minute segment strategically analyzing each of these pills for their strengths and weaknesses. I realized we didn't really need that here,
Did you
but
catch
let
up
me
to
know
that?
if you want a video with me explaining these
I
different
did
pills
not.
in the future.
Let me back up a little. It's pretty much standard. You mostly hear about red pill and black pill.
Okay.
But
I had a 10-minute segment strategically analyzing each of these pills for their strengths and weaknesses. I realized we didn't really need that here, but let me know if you want a video with me explaining these different pills in the future. The right made an active decision to break away from the old worldview, while the left needed to double down. I'm so disappointed that all the anarchist, rebel, punk tendencies inside the left were so fake. They've become complete bootlickers for the regime, and it's depressing to see even communists who are supposedly there to support the working classes betray them for wokeness. The thing is that the way the left differs from the 2010 order is by distilling said order into even greater fanaticism. What that means is that the philosophic conclusions of the blue pill era in their worldview have to be pushed even further without question. Things like equality, secularism, standardization, which are innately false, need to be pushed to their ultimate culmination. Ironically enough, there's two kinds of blue pilled person. You have the boomer blue pill and the zoomer blue pill. And the boomer blue pill is taking the post-World War II silliness at its original face value and then not changing and ignoring how the world has altered massively since 1970, while the zoomer blue pill is just complete deranged insanity, pushing these originally incorrect assumptions to, again, complete insanity. The 2010 order is already dead since it was always built off lies. The left deals with this by making the lies even more obnoxious. I hope you can see how in the process of doing so, they make it impossible to adjust strategically as they default into being a cult. Ironically, their moral code literally denies the importance of evidence, which is so brutal, it's not even something a conservative could make up about the left as a parody. So, what happened with the left? To start, the left gained control over the West's institutions around the time period of the World Wars. You see this in how the Western elites did a tremendous amount to cover up the communist atrocities that occurred under Mao or Stalin. However, the left was absolutely brilliant at psyoping the public, creating the false mirage of consent, fairness, science, and rationality. Over the course of a century, the state and bureaucracy grew more powerful, the culture grew more leftwards, women gained more authority, while America got less white. The left is a kind of mythical vampiric succubi which seduces its prey by saying whatever sweet words to get them to go back to sleep so that they can suck our blood again. It's hard to understand why the left so irrationally hates Trump until you realize this fact. The left created this false mirage of reality in which they distorted human nature, physics, history, anthropology, religion, and any other discipline to reflect back their absurdities onto the rest of the world. This meant that the things that the rest of history would see as complete madness would come across as common sense to a modern person trying to understand the world. The left created a
We could
psychological
definitely
web
see
where
that
once you accept
when
one of their
Biden was in office. And we had that one psychiatrist, forget his name, shame on me, but remember it was right about the time they had like those NASCAR races and they were saying, fuck Joe Biden. And even the reporter was saying, oh, it's let's go Brandon. And, that psychiatrist spoke out and they tried to take his accreditation away. They try to just basically
Jordan
shame.
Peterson.
Yes, Jordan. They basically, no, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's like, that's something that never seen. It's like when somebody speaks out against you, you laugh and you carry on. You don't acknowledge, you don't attack them like that.
Right. Yeah, that's it is actually historically has been done, typically done by totalitarians or authoritarians when there is someone's dissenting against their usurped or even gained power, because like Venezuela, they voted in the problems that they have now. And once you vote in a totalitarian or an authoritarian, you can't vote them out, because once they're in, they begin to insulate themselves, rigging elections and so on and so forth, so that you can't get them back out unless you fight them.
Same thing with Alex Jones. I know when he spoke up, it was about the school shootings, and they basically tried to sue him for billions of dollars.
Right.
And it's like, you don't ever acknowledge a conspiracy theorist, because once you do, now you're actually putting weight behind what they're saying.
Right. Well, now we know conspiracy theorists are about 6 months away from being just proven true. And
Well, the part that got me is the shooting in Texas. And I heard this on the news, and I had to stop and go, what? Because they were saying the school superintendent lied to a grand jury and didn't go to prison. Instead, they're like, here's retirement. Have a nice life.
right. And if it's typically because, like he said, and I think I've mentioned this before, they took over the institutions when the collapse of communism happened, and they knew that they couldn't take on the United States head on. They knew they had to infiltrate and destroy it from within. And that's what they've done over the last 100 years or so. It's just been a concerted effort to undermine all of the things that made America the world power that it is. But they didn't want to completely dismantle America, because America in and of itself is a cash cow for the rest of the world. We basically pay for everyone to be able to have the things that they have. Most notably, their socialist healthcare systems, their socialist programs are unsustainable to those countries on their own. They have to have an influx of outside income to support those systems, because those systems inherently cannot support themselves. And there's another video with some examples of it, but it boils down to, if you have a socialist system, you have to have people that are going to work, and they're going to have to produce a percentage higher than what they normally produce. So, like, let's say someone produces 100 units. We'll just make them arbitrary. Let's say each person needs 100 units to survive, and you have a group and you tell the group, like, everyone has an option to work. The state will provide. So you'll have those that may want to work and those that most likely won't work. They all require 100 units of whatever to live. So when the workers go to work, each of them produces 100 units on a normal day's work. That means that they can support themselves, not those that don't work. So that means now you have to require those that work to produce enough to cover those that don't work. then you'll come to the situation where those that are now being forced to work more to produce for those that don't work, not wanting to work because they see those that don't work getting it, and they're going to go, well, why am I working? And then they'll join those that don't work. And then those that are still working will have to produce more and work harder because now you have more people not working. And that is very rudimentary explanation of how socialism fails. It is unsustainable.
They win no matter what you do. I cover this more so in my video called Shatter the Glass. If a white person moves out of a minority area, it's white flight, and inside one is gentrification. If a man is too aggressive with a woman, it's rapey, and if he's too passive, it's not attractive and it's an ick. The left was able to make our entire world reflect their lies, which made it almost impossible to break out of their web of illusions. The way I did it was from reading history, one of the most difficult fields to purely falsify, and this is why there are so many historians who become conservative pundits. The left was able to even get the right to reflect their own fantasies. The right was able to play along with the left's game of bureaucracy, safetyism, femininity, minority appeals, the college system, corporate America, amongst other things. The reason the left hates Trump so much is that he is a single man who's defied their entire order. Inside Trump is a story of how the left is completely wrong and evil.
So it's his personality trait. He is a very headstrong, defiant person who likes challenge, and his ego prevents him from failing or prevents him from accepting failure. Like, he cannot allow himself to have an outward appearance of being unsuccessful, and that is twisted into his motivation, his aspirations, his drive, and that's why he is perfect for this. Like, it was perfect timing for him to do this. He's at the end of, I wouldn't say at the end of his life, but he's reaching sunset, and he wants to leave a legacy. And he had, throughout the last 40 years or so or more, been consistent in saying that, he didn't really want the job of being the president. If he had become president, he would want to make the country, prosperous. And now he's been consistent with that message. It's just that when he was saying it before, he was part of the Democrat Party. It wasn't until recently when he decided that their views and his views don't align, and it was probably because he started to see the corruption. So then he switched parties, and that's when they started to attack him. And it wasn't really like he switched parties at first because the Republicans more aligned with what he was trying to do, but then, like, he was creating a separate, technically third party called MAGA, and that's where we're at today, which consists of Democrats, independents, and conservatives who are just fed up with the do-nothing Republicans and the crazy, insane, terroristic leftists. So it's an interesting dynamic that happened, and how this all laid out. If you're looking, you can see influence of God in the whole process, especially from Butler County in July, because you can't fake that. Like, no matter what people say, like, the hard evidence, the hard fact of that incident is there's no way to fake shooting somebody and narrowly missing them, especially from that range. I mean, it's a short range, like you can shoot someone from that distance without a scope, but that also means you're not going to be able to accurately 100% make sure that your bullet trajectory is close enough to nick them but not kill them. You got wind factor, you have gravity, you have bullet composition, because all bullets they're in spec, but they waver. Some might have had, like, let's say you have like 9mm is typically 155 grain, but I said typically because they can vary because it's not exact. They try to get them as exact as possible, but there are variances in the metal, the tolerances. So, like, there are way too many variables to pull off a fake nick of the ear. And to have him turn his head right when that was passing by, and it was just at the right angle, because if he wouldn't have done it enough, the back of his head would have been blown off. If he'd done it too much, it would have shot him right between the eyes. His head angled exactly where it needed to be for that bullet just to whiz by his ear. Definitely an act of God.
Read this text wall if you're interested, but Trump is a man who was successful enough that he no longer needed the system. He then showed how the managerial class had been destroying America by appealing to normal Americans who had been grounded under the heel of a machine, whether through deindustrialization, immigration, DEI, the breakdown of the family, the school system, and so many other things. To continue explaining the reason that the left hates Trump is that for them to actually understand why so many Americans voted for him, they would have to completely destroy their own worldview. They have to motivate their followers into hating Trump, since in their false worldview, if they can get rid of Trump, they've removed the one thing that can snap their mirage. Keep in mind that psychological studies keep finding that rightists are capable of mentally understanding leftists, but not vice versa. In fact, rightists have mental models of the left that are 3 times as accurate at predicting their actions and ideas than vice versa. This is for complex neurological reasons I explain in this text wall.
Interesting. I found that interesting.
That is a funny irony.
Isn't it? Let me know when you're ready.
I am.
Right.
Another point I'll also throw in is that if you look at Europe or Canada or other countries, you can see that Trump was an incredibly historically significant figure because all of their conservative parties have been psyoped and taken in by the managerial uniparty, which is why lots of conservative parties in Britain or Canada or Australia or France or Germany are to the left of the American Democrat Party. The number one demographic the left aims at psyoping at this point are themselves. An ironic term invented by the left is a thought-terminating point. The purpose of this is to give an easy answer to make someone shut up and make them stop asking questions. This is a further incredible example of the point I keep on saying, that you can just look at the left's projections to figure out what they're doing. A great example of this is in one of my favorite movies ever, American Beauty, where a teenager works a crappy job to cover the expensive stuff he buys off actually being a drug dealer. For his dad, although the money he makes from catering is nowhere near enough for his son's obvious expenses, it does provide plausible deniability for his dad's denial. This is literally everything the left says now. It's all some thought-terminating point for their own followers to not have to realize that their entire vision of reality is wrong. It's not for you, it's for them. When it seems unbelievably cringe and completely unbelievable, it's because they don't really care about you believing it at this point anymore. It's funny, when people watch these videos, they tend to think I'm some autistic, hyper-rational person, but the reality is I'm actually a very emotional person, with emotions being the most important part of my inner monologue. I almost perfectly fit the sensitive young man meme, which is a joke they have in rightist circles that the next generation of young male leadership are sensitive young men that do stuff like stare at a well, thinking about the innate nature of life and death as symbolized in the water of the well. I've done that. Thus, when I study a group or an environment, the predominant thing I look at is the emotional state of everyone involved. I'm very intimate with the modern American left. Since I have loads of American relatives, I've lived for years in very left-wing cities, worked with leftists, and spent nearly a decade in leftist schooling. I was here for this process, so I know exactly how it played out. A great thing the left never realizes is that the red bubble is significantly weaker than the blue bubble in that almost no conservatives in America have never seen a leftist argument, but plenty of leftists have never seen a conservative argument. The left was very smug and complacent before Trump. It's crazy how many leftists today unironically believe that Obama is the best president in American history.
Right.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, those of us who lived through it and actually had to deal with the realities of it, we know this is a lie.
I was getting promoted. I had my own house.
And
I lost all of that because of him.
right. And I almost, like, if I hadn't found this job, I could see it from budgeting our budget that we were headed on a slope of not being able to pay the mortgage that we comfortably afforded prior to the Bidenflation. And so, I had to find this job. And luckily, I was able to land this job. But then the final year, this past tax season, I told you I paid almost $29,000 in taxes, which is the exact buffer zone, the exact amount of money that I got as an increase in pay from getting this job. And I shudder to think, because if Kamala would have got in without having that buffer, I was back to where I was before. And could I find, I mean, I had an offer through LinkedIn for this other job, but it wasn't in this field. It was more of a technical sales. I hate sales. So, like, could I find another 30,000 increase in pay? Probably not. I for sure saw the writing on the wall that if Kamala won, I'd be losing my house. And all of the things that I worked hard to get. But they don't care about that. They say they care about minorities. They say they care about, making sure people can afford houses. It's all lies. Because if they did, I wouldn't have had to do what I needed to do.
It's like I ended up losing my house in Vegas because of it.
Right.
It's like with Obamacare, it was like you have to have health care if you work more than 20 hours a week. And basically, if you go over that threshold, basically your employer is responsible for it. And there was no workaround for that whatsoever. Can I go get my own health care? No. It's like, well, it's like, how does that benefit me? Because that cuts the amount of hours I can work in half. That means I have to go find another job, which means I can't get another promotion because they wanted me to treat it like it's my primary job if I wanted to keep going up the ladder. And it's like, that's impossible.
Right.
Like, if I keep this my primary job for 6 months, I'm going to be on the street. I have to have more than 20 hours a week, or it's not worth it.
Right. They cause an artificial struggle and claim that they're helping you.
And then on top of that, I was getting penalized every year. Like, you don't have health care? Well, you gotta pay the government a couple $100 a year. And this is bullshit.
They fined you for not being able to afford the insurance that they're forcing on you. Yeah. Don't try to make it make sense. It doesn't make sense. There's no reality where that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like none of that was in the benefit of the American people. It's like, I don't know whose pockets that lined, but granted, from from what Doge is finding out, obviously Obama was just lining his own pockets.
Right.
Well, in reality,
Oh, are you guys done reading? Or is it okay to move on?
Yeah, they don't even talk about all the shit he was doing in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, the whole time he was in office, they were just presenting him as he was like a freaking messiah.
Right. While they themselves were suffering. I mean, everybody was, the whole country was devastated. Is everybody done?
Yes.
Okay.
he was pretty terrible across the board. Obama gave the left a sense of stability, and they had grown used to complete social dominance and that the world was guided towards their vision of progress. After Trump seized power, they had an emotional deluge. I talk about this more in the text wall in front of you, but the left went through something that looks like the
He should just leave it on while he's, instead of showing those B reels of like,
Yeah.
Well, I remember, especially on social media, the memes or the videos, because it was like somebody posted a 10-minute video of Arnold screaming in, I think it was the first Predator movie, and they just cut it so he was screaming constantly. And it's like, this is how I feel after Trump won the election. I'm like, what? Like, why? It's like none of these were reasons, and it was kind of like even trying to talk to Blue about it was just, oh, he was so against Trump because Trump supposedly screwed over some business person that he knew. And it's like, okay, what does that have to? And here's the argument I would give him. What does that have to do with him as a president?
right,
And he would have nothing to say to that.
right,
One of the hardest things to get Blue to understand is because he even tried to defend Obamacare at one point. It's like Blue is a union painter. So he's always going to have work. He's always going to have a job. And, you know, even during the off seasons, it's like, here's a paycheck. You're laid off. You know, we'll see you in a couple months. You know, but it's like for those of us who aren't union, or you know, it's like, no, we have to work 24 hours a day. Yeah.
right. Like me, even right now, like I see I'm gonna be short on retirement, so I have so many irons in the fire. I'm constantly trying to do things, trying to get something to kick off. I have my app. I'm thinking about, I have this, I made 3D printed this cup holder thing, and then I made it modular so you can add on different attachments, and I made an attachment for the Xbox Series One or Elite Series 2 controller, uh, to where you take the the charging pad and it sits in the back of it towards where it connects, and then you plug it in with a 90-degree angle USB-C cord. Then you can put your controller into the cradle. It hangs off the edge of your desk, and it's because what was going on was it was always on my desk taking up real estate. I kept moving it around, knocking it off, and I'm like, fine, I'll make an attachment for the cup holder, and it works great. Like, it doesn't fall. I can set it in there and it's charging and it's out of the way. I can move it around. So I plan on marketing that at some point, but like, it's got to be timed right. Like, that's like a secondary thing. Like, if I'm getting more views to the app. I'm getting um a few more people now and then are buying it, buying a full license for it. but it's nowhere near able to support itself, let alone like help invest in trying to figure out how I'm going to mass produce this thing. I mean, I thought about Etsy, but like this is something that I would have to be able to like produce on demand, and right now it takes about at least 5 hours or more to print it. So if I have like 100 orders, there's no way I could fill unless I specifically tell them, hey, it'll take me a couple days to get this to you. So I don't know.
There are a couple 3D printing shops on Etsy, and that's kind of what they say is, hey, we print these to order. So as you order, this is your expected turnaround time.
Okay.
I think I ordered a Resident Evil prop a couple years ago, and I want to say it took about 3 to 4 weeks to arrive because he 3D printed it, painted it, and then shipped it to me. But Etsy's kind of its own bag of worms.
Right.
Because there's a growing number of people, because of the prices of used video games, people are doing what's called reproductions. And it's basically, for example, a printable CD, like, say, a Dreamcast game. They'll burn the game onto disc, print it, do a case, box art, whatever, so it looks good, on your shelf, but it's like 15, $20. I mean, obviously, yes, it's kind of piracy, but for some of these games, your alternative, if you want a legitimate copy, is $100, or like I know a couple games on the Sega Saturn that are $4,000. And there was just no way. Like, people can't obviously afford that for a video game. And I know Etsy's kind of taken it on themselves to try to shut down some of the shops, but then later they would say, oh, it's okay. I mean, the reality of the situation is that if, for example, let's say I pirate your controller software, Thranduil finds out and he tries to shut me down. Legally, he can't. He has to notify you, and then you come after me as the copyright holder.
Right. Right. Well,
But that's kind of what I'm getting annoyed with, is people jumping on this bandwagon or that bandwagon because it's supposedly right, and it's like, well, the law says, you should really do what the law says.
I wonder how this is, because getting off tangent here, it's more Sony has discontinued Blu-ray media. So
Really?
yeah, they are no longer making anything Blu-ray. That includes the discs. So third party is probably going to make rewritables still, but you like the Blu-rays and even the DVDs that are out there right now, that's it. The stock of them are going to start, and I already see it. Like I'll like I've been collecting them for over a year now, and I've got quite a few collections of series and movies now. And every time I think of another one, I'll go up and like you can't find Bicentennial Man now on Blu-ray or DVD. It's impossible. That's one example.
I know Sony tried to take the American people to court in the 80s with VHS tapes, trying to say they were making pirated works, and luckily that backfired on them. And the courts will know if people want to record stuff for their own personal viewing pleasure, they can. And I noticed when DVDs and Blu-rays came out, they didn't bother to make it a legal thing. They just tried to use the end user license agreement,
right,
as their bargaining chip for that.
And then they tried, you know, DRM stuff that made it hard to record. Like it screw up the image or the audio. Even like I got the last copy of season, I believe it was season 5 of the original X-Men animated series off of Amazon. Like it no longer exists on Amazon anymore.
Yeah, I had to just give up on getting that because it's the used prices are just so outrageous.
I found a couple decent copies. Season 1, 2, and 4 are brand new. I think season 3 and Yeah, season 3 is used, and I think season 5 is used because, like I said, I couldn't get the 5th season otherwise. Like, I had to reach out to somebody who happened to have a decent copy of it, in its original case and everything, but it was, just sitting in their shelf somewhere, and they parted with it, and that was it. That was the only copy. And so now I have them. But, like, see, I don't know if I would be able to make copies of them to hand them out to you, but we can talk about that later. So anyway, back on track. Are you guys done with this wall of text?
Yes.
Okay. Threadville?
Yes, yes.
7 stages of grief. The psychological fallout due to Trump winning was enormous. If you want a sliver, just watch the SNL video that came out about it. Funnily enough, I did watch John Oliver and SNL then. This was seen as basically a nuclear bomb on their myth of progress. The left went completely hysterical over pretty menial stuff Trump did or said. In retrospect, how the left treated Trump was completely inexcusable. It's kind of funny that now that I've lived in other countries around the world, the stuff Mexican or African or Southeast Asian politicians casually say is so much more tame than Trump, and no one cares in those countries. This was the period the left started to diverge from reality. I remember seeing this in real time as a teenager, as I saw the left had made the conscious decision that reality didn't really exist, that facts didn't matter, and that the world itself was determined by the emotional experiences of the oppressed, and that power determines truth. Starting then, even as a 15-year-old, I knew that the left would go completely crazy. This, combined with the left's insane purity spiraling, means that the left started from there, couldn't help to go completely and crazy. They literally removed every single mechanism they could have used to recenter themselves from their own madness, since they got rid of all the dissenters while also removing any logical or philosophic reset mechanisms. I loved watching the left squirm over Kamala Harris, since I knew a decade ago that they would culminate in this. Their purity spiraling over race and sex was something they had no mechanism to stop, and thus it would eat them inside until they had to appoint a black woman as president. It's a wonder they didn't have to make her gay as well, or trans, or disabled. One who could barely speak publicly, who was universally disliked by both her staff and the public, and who ultimately lost them probably the most important election of the century. What we're ultimately watching now is a movement which followed its original logic, weeding out all the dissenters and now is short-circuiting. There's a historic event which reminds me a lot of the current left. In the early 1500s, during the Protestant Reformation, Germany was plagued by religious wars between Catholics, Protestants, and then again between different varieties of Protestant. Messianic Protestants took over the city of Munster in northwest Germany. As they became walled in by Catholic besiegers, during the siege they spiraled into complete madness, in which they started practicing polygamy, sexual communism, material communism, and mass killings, with internal civil wars. The modern left is an enormous cult, which is doing the exact same thing, which isn't really surprising, given wokeness is very clearly a descendant of Protestantism. COVID was another example of this incredible hysteria. The left used so much emotion over Trump won and COVID that they're completely burnt out. COVID was relatively tame as an illness, which we shut down the economy, locked people down, and spent trillions of dollars to deal with. I know we all have stories from our personal life about how hysterical the left got over COVID. The other thing is that with COVID, and especially so the summer of love, the left was able to gain complete institutional authority. This is important to realize since it completely changed the calculus and perception of the left. Before 2020, the left could convincingly lie that they were the downtrodden, supporting the common man. After that, in which every major institution was beyond woke, and wokeness was very clearly about complete domination of white men, with their complete removal from all public life. It was clear that wokeness was a very powerful, suicidal, and insidious force that would kill the West unless stopped. Where does this leave the internal monologue of the average leftist? Keep in mind that if you're a leftist at this point, you've been through so many filters that you're so deep into the cult. It was a decade ago when the free-thinking leftists like Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Shoe on Head, Dave Rubin, Sad Gad, and all the others migrated into the rightist coalition. Keep in mind, the average leftist has probably never heard an honest conservative perspective in their entire lives. The thing with woke people is that as wokeness has become significantly more nihilistic, suicidal, and evil, it consumes more of their minds. Back in
I'm doing a stream for my channel. We're doing a reaction commentary to some news and current events.
2015, there were loads of leftists who were functioning members of society. They wrote books, had children, served in the military, worked jobs, and all that kind of stuff. It used to be leftists were seen as good at producing culture, making food, and leftist cities were nice places to live. That's not true anymore. An interesting example of this is that in marketing and in sales, woke demographics buy vastly less than their purchasing power should entail. Upon further study, the only reason for this is that woke people were so psychologically disturbed that they just had less hobbies, interests, and bought less stuff than other demographics. Part 3. The mind of a leftist. In the recent years since COVID, we've seen the left hit a real burnout. I think the left burned out and gave up around 2022. Keep in mind, since the left is so psychologically feminine today, they see politics as an avenue to express extreme emotions to allay their own boredom and nihilism. This is why they're so hysterical, but the problem is that given they were so hysterical for so long, they just burned out all their emotional circuits. The left lost the ability to emotionally self-regulate, comprehend their environment, or believe in anything around 2022. A great irony is that the left got burnt out right when they gained complete institutional capture by the most insane group of radical leftists. This is the worst place to be because hopefully after you've attained institutional power, it energizes you so that you can use that power. This is the point you see leftist messaging get deranged and nihilistic for its own sake. It stopped having a real pretense about helping black people, women, or whatever, and just veered into social suicide. I actually rarely see leftist messaging that's per se about black people or women now. Instead, you start seeing the climate become a bigger motivator, given climate change offers a complete carte blanche for social suicide. Ultimately, the way you get rid of carbon emissions is to get rid of industrial civilization and humans themselves. This was something that Jordan Peterson predicted a decade ago, that environmentalism would ultimately lead to social suicide, but I didn't believe him at the time. I am going to coin Lynch's law, stemming from my own last name. Lynch's law is that no matter how psychologically unwell you believe the left to be, they're even worse. This is a phenomena I keep finding in one way or another from all the ways I've interacted with the left. I meet leftists casually who believe the most suicidally deranged nihilistic stuff that you can tell were fed to them by their own peer groups, in which they are in complete agreement. This is a brief list of genuine things I've seen and heard in my personal life, not even online. I've seen multiple friend groups of girls my age who all became lesbians together simultaneously. I've seen it normalized among young women that having children is morally wrong due to climate reasons, where they'll often want to adopt a minority baby instead. I've seen leftists talk about banning the air conditioner in the American South for climate reasons. I've heard leftists say that Trump wants to install a racial caste system, forcing non-whites back into slavery. I've heard leftists say that we need to use the state to forcibly deindustrialize the economy. Keep in mind, these types of people are the ones in charge of every major institution. An important thing conservatives haven't realized is that a very important part of the left's evolution is that you saw a split inside the left left between the more dissident pro-Palestine leftists and the more establishment pro-Israel leftists. And the Gaza war really split a lot of coalitions inside the left. And what happened is that the more dissident, frankly insane factions of the left stopped believing that their masters at places like CNN or the DNC had a lot of their best interests in mind. So they stopped doing fact-checking altogether, which means that they're getting news from TikTok and Instagram, which has no factual basis, but they're getting riled up. And because they don't trust anything the system says, and that they're so gullible and naive, you can get them to believe the most deranged stuff, which might result in blood on the streets. I've had a couple "you idiot" moments recently with this demographic of leftist. For example, young women leaving TikTok, going to the Chinese app Red Note, and saying China is a wealthier and a freer society than America.
What?
Yeah, the insanity is real.
Say everything you do there is monitored, regulated. You log into your computer with your face. That you do not have widespread internet access.
But see, the freedom that they feel is the freedom from responsibility, not actual freedom. It's freedom is wrought with responsibility and accountability. That's where it's coming from. They see it as freeing because they don't have to think as much. They don't have to try as much. It's just set out for them. They just do their thing. As long as they stay within the lines, they feel free because they're free from responsibility.
And I'm thinking, by literally no.
Oh, were you guys done?
I'm in STO.
Okay.
Yes, I'm done.
Okay.
Metric you could possibly choose. Is that true? I've been to China, man, and it's not that nice. Even the nicest cities. Or I'll see other stuff where they'll say that the cartels will beat the US military. And I thought, you know literally nothing about warfare if you believe that. That's just insane. What kind of mind even produces this stuff? This is just sheer madness. How do you predict the minds of a madman? I was trying to analyze what mental illnesses the left has, and the conclusion I came to was yes. My only credentials in the field of psychology are reading a few dozen books on this topic, but the left does show traits of schizophrenia, egomaniacalness, narcissism, PTSD, self-loathing, suicidality, amongst others.
That's true.
Oh,
Alright, I'm done reading that.
Okay.
oh, I just started. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Let me know. Yeah, I mean, you can see it because the one they embrace, like if you talk to any of them that are, I would say, the neo ones, it's like, oh, I'm so and so. I'm, I have whatever illness, ADHD or depression, or they have a whole long laundry list of things that they wear on their sleeve as illnesses, but also like they're signifying like, this is my measure of victimhood. So to them, that's a status. Like the more victim you are, the more status you have, which is why you'll see them infighting sometimes when it's a passive infighting, because like when they introduce themselves to each other, it's like, here's my illnesses and this is how I'm oppressed, and then someone will say, oh yeah, I understand that, and here's my illnesses and how I'm oppressed, and then the other person might feel like, oh, they're trying to one up me on being oppressed, or how many illnesses they have, and they'll say, like, they'll add to their list, and it's like a competition for who is the most oppressed and the most victim to get the most status.
I mean, it definitely shouldn't. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, like I have depression, right? But I and it's nice that I can relate to people,
Right. But you're treating it,
who open it up. Well, yeah, yeah. I mean,
and you're
yeah. I
not
mean, I have to,
you're
or
not
I would.
announcing it to everybody like that's you. That's
Yeah,
part of
no, like I mean, I have depression. Yeah, I'm treating it. Otherwise, I would have like already taken my life now.
right. But you didn't, like, when
Just-
we met, you weren't like, oh, I'm so and so, and I'm being
no,
treated for depression and blah blah blah. Like, that yeah, it's, to them it's like a currency. It's like a currency and a status,
yeah,
and
definitely.
it's
I would,
very
I
odd.
would not, I would not wish depression really anybody. Like
Right. I was
my
on
experience.
Zoloft for a while when I went through my first divorce and my kids were taken from
Yeah,
me, basically. Uh,
yeah,
it was a rough time. I had
yeah.
depression, and I treated myself and got out of it and moved on. I didn't like what I was saying about them is, like, they purposely want to stay in it. Like,
Yeah.
they don't want it solved, because if it's solved, it's taken from their pool of status or currency that they can use within their collective. So they have to hold on to it.
Past a certain threshold, it's just insanity, man. Suicide is the dominant endpoint in which they aim for the complete destruction of the West, their home. The best thing the right has going for us is the left wants to lose. Let's enable them in their own desires. The left is at a weird, basically schizophrenic level, in which schizophrenics, after losing their connection to reality, will hyper-obsess over a handful of topics which they psychologically can't break out of. For the left, they're super psychologically obsessed with black people, the climate, gays, and that stuff. I remember when I was visiting Boston, I saw all these support LGBT signs everywhere. I'm not against gays, but I thought to myself, why does sticking your dick up someone's ass make you a hero? The left has spent years actively discouraging literally anything except these topics, so they're mentally stuck. I remember when I was in college, the professors literally asking me how my every essay related to oppression. When I was in high school, they remade the entire curriculum to be around leftism. This is important since we stopped reading Shakespeare, Beowulf, or Charles Dickens, all of which they replaced with leftist authors. They replaced teaching
What?
history
It's a
for talking
shame.
about blacks in Harlem a century ago. We didn't cover the Industrial Revolution, or the World Wars, or the French Revolution. What this means
What?
is that the left has lost
Crazy,
literally
huh?
any neurological or cultural ability to move gears. The human mind is a living place where you have to cultivate the ability to think about things, and the left has shut off all of their neurological and mental ability to do anything except go crazy. Ironically, the left reminds me a lot of Imperial Japan during World War II, which in most value or political compass surveys is literally the exact opposite of wokeness, being a hyper-militaristic, hierarchical, imperialistic, racist, socially conservative society obsessed with loyalty, authority, and purity. However, Imperial Japan and the wokies have a core similarity, or the inability to self-regulate their own purity spirals. The thing that's very dangerous about the left today is that they know they're going to lose, and I believe on a subconscious basis, they're starting to realize they're wrong, which I will talk about in the next segment. A horrifying thing to watch in Japan's World War II history is that the Japanese became so aggressive and militaristic that they made horrific miscalculations.
Are you guys playing tonight?
I'm not sure about Amy and Olia, but we had just finished doing some daily stuff. I think he checked out for the night. I'm not sure if he's coming back.
Okay.
I'm done reading it.
Okay.
Oh, yes, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sometimes you gotta like
ultimately killing their entire empire since people were constantly trying to outdo the other in insanity. This is how Japan declared war on a coalition of nations with 20 times their population at the exact same time. We're seeing a few very dangerous psychological conditions which add up here to something really bad. The first, as we've said a few times before, is the removal of dissidents who would realign them back to sanity, as well as any moral principles that could do that. The second is decades of ego investment without even an understanding of what a non-leftist worldview would even look like. If the left tries to adapt, they will do so in the stupidest way possible, since they can't even understand basic concepts like men and women are different, that white men loathe them from decades of abuse, or they need to provide basic incentives for people who work for them. They're the spoiled aristocracy of a dying empire. Lots of older folks think that the left is more aggressive than the right among young people. That might have been true decades ago, but the most competent people among the young are on the right. I hate to be this blunt, but most of the young talent are white men, where any young white man of fiber has been purged from the left already. Whenever the left tries to do stuff on the ground, it's so pathetic. Either between the Columbia protests asking to be delivered food and water, or Chaz in Seattle collapsing into a military dictatorship run by a SoundCloud rapper and losing their food supplies within a few hours. The left lacks any tactical ability or strategic thinking at all. They can only make wrong decisions. The Columbia protests were a huge tell for me, which I can't understate. First of all, I'm the same age as these kids, and so I know they went through about half a dozen years of anti-Holocaust programming, and then the second they get out of the cradle, they're saying intifada. Watching the videos was insane, firstly since they're so overtly bloodthirsty, which I think was a huge PR defeat for the left. Secondly, they're so obviously Marxist. They were talking about the world revolution and the need to always carry on the revolution in their hearts.
is that proletariat? How do you say that?
Proletariat.
Proletariat?
I'm done with that.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Decades of leftists saying they're not really Marxists has just become thrown out the window. And thirdly, it was nigh impossible to find videos of the Columbia protests after they came out. And you guys should watch the Sitch and Adams podcast, which has a great commentary on them. Because
So many text walls. He needs to fix that.
One of the reasons why I stopped using Google, because I started to find out is they're filtering what the search engine.
Right. He's still doing it today. I had to go to DuckDuckGo to find something because Google thought I didn't need to see it.
Even DuckDuckGo has started doing it too.
Right.
I've started moving over to something called entireweb.com.
I'll have to check that out.
I've only been using it for a day or so.
Wow. Okay, yes, I read.
Okay.
because it was suppressed by Google, which is another tell about where the ruling class's loyalties lie. It's very clear that this is a dangerous cult in that the Columbia protests sectioned off an area of campus as sacred space that non-Marxists weren't allowed to go, alongside marching and rank and chanting. Also, as I said before, the Columbia protests are useful to look at since the kids are so clearly pathetic, stupid, and weak. They're so clearly artificial as people are in general. They can only exist in the safest, wealthiest, and most coddled society ever. They want a war they'd lose in and they don't realize it. I know a lot of these kids personally, since I've worked with, dated, and interviewed Ivy League kids my age. However incompetent and arrogant you imagine them to be, just double it at least. It's horrific to watch. Also, I've been seeing protests saying make the Intifada global. For those that don't know, Intifada is an anti-colonial war of genocide, and the fact they're singing this in cities across America is just insane. And I'm also thinking to myself, you guys really want to try this? Because you will lose so hard. Another factor here is that the leftists themselves are deeply psychologically unwell. If you meet radical leftists, you'll find that their lives are frequently complete dumpster fires. This is since leftism is literally predicated upon mate suppression or giving others terrible advice. Like,
Yeah, they've actually been memeing that to sort of make it into a joke.
Mm.
And that goes back to like the cultist aspect, because I remember when I was right around seven or eight, before we had moved from Northeast PA to, um, my dad retired and we moved south, to Mercer. I remember my older brother David waking me up in the middle of the night because he was in the kitchen with my dad, crying about his wife who actually got indoctrinated into a cult and he couldn't save her, and how terrible it like ripped his family apart, ripped him apart, and I like that will always stick with me and always has stuck with me. Um, to lose somebody to a real life cult and the things that they do that separate you from your family, they fill your head with all of these outlandish ideas. It I have experience with this. I see it. I see what they're doing. It's not good. You guys are done?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes, yes.
being mentally
Sorry,
ill, fat, poor, underachieving, and that stuff being good. If you want a look into this, just look at the lives of leftist streamers, almost all of whom's reputations have been destroyed by one bizarre degeneracy or another. It's kind of cruel that the left said that all that degeneracy was fine, but it actually wasn't true, and then it destroyed their reputations.
This is true. As I'm watching a lot of these other streamers, you're seeing, like I've seen a lot of things about Destiny. Mr. Beast had a bunch of things happen recently that was like, WTF moments. Um, yeah, it's just part and parcel. Is that the saying?
I'm done with that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a real bait and switch. One of the most horrifying parts of the left is how much they encourage mental illness. There's an almost hilarious stat of comparing mental illness by demographics, and literally half of far left women have a diagnosed mental illness. I'm not like other girls, or most conservative pundits, in that I am very sympathetic to mental illness. I think trying to solve the mental health crisis is probably the most important thing I want to accomplish before I die. However, the left does mental illness in the most counterproductive way. For example, as I've tried to heal from PTSD, I've worked with a leftist and a rightist therapist. The leftist therapist kept on saying, I hear you, and tell me more, and I'd say, no, I want you to actually heal my condition, and they couldn't do that. And then I moved over to a rightist therapist who actually set goals with a certain type of EMDR therapy for actually accomplishing certain degrees of healing. I think that's very paradigmatic in that it shows that one of these doesn't actually want to solve your issue. They just want to make your bearing of your own patheticness easier, and the other actually wants to solve your condition. And leftist mental health involves enabling their worst traits. And it's crazy to go to blue states and see young people where they'll proudly talk about having anxiety and depression and powerlessness and other traits. And when you do psychological studies of leftism, you'll find that they have all these things. And
This is true.
That's very true. I went through that when I had my anxiety attack, and it was just like, oh, here's some drugs, get out of here.
Right.
I'm like, that doesn't solve this. Okay.
Okay.
they have absolutely no interest in fixing them. As I've said in previous videos, the purpose of leftism is to abdicate responsibility, and thus everything they say has to ultimately go to blaming someone else. This puts them in a horrific mental trap of their own making, which they refuse to break out of. Part 4. Short Circuit. I paid one of my friends to watch 10 hours of BreadTube content and some mainstream leftist media for me, and then write a strategic analysis. For those that don't know, BreadTube is the term for leftist YouTube. He did a great job, and it was actually the origin of this video. I was going through the recent BreadTube content today just to
I
summarize
don't
whether
know
my
if I could
thesis is
mentally
still
handle that.
fundamentally accurate, which is something I know no BreadTuber would ever do. God, these people are completely worthless. Nothing they make is original. The only thing they do is mock and tear others down. They have no interest in generating culture, helping people, educating, or making the world a better place. They're so pathetic and nihilistic, I have no clue why anyone would watch them. They add literally no value. There are literally no leftists I admire at this point as thinkers. A decade ago, there were plenty. Throw on
Right.
top of this literally every major leftist streamer has destroyed their own reputation through one bizarre degeneracy or another. I know of no major figures on the left who are still going as cultural icons. My friend's report ironically said that the mainstream leftist media was more stupid and less innovative than BreadTube, which is horrifying and insane to think. I wonder what they're doing with their enormous budgets. He said that the party line between all of them was pretty similar in that the left is an enormous hive mind. Keep in mind that the left is incapable of generating real leadership at this point due to the enormous envy inside their own faction. However, the big theme my friend teased out was that the left knew something was wrong and that their strategy wasn't working, but that they had no idea what to do about it. Due to the years of the processes described above playing out, they just can't rationally disengage. I think some of the leftist thought leaders are somewhat aware of the lie, but hold on for some sociopathic sense of personal gain or grift. The left is sputtering. They can see that things are getting worse in their personal lives, which is just an obvious fact of life in America today.
This is true. It's collectivism, and that's why you'll see most areas that typically lean that way are cities, because the social programs only work best in cities.
Understandable, because it's just between the cost of living in cities, like people don't have time to really see what is going on. It's like they're just, I gotta go to work, I gotta go do this, I gotta go.
Right.
There's just so much on your plate.
It's by design. He misspelled corpse.
Yeah, it's
To ask him, what is a dead corp? Is that like some? Is that like a carp? Is that a fish?
I'll take it that you guys are done.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Their narrative that this is all motivated by white men just makes no logical sense, given the left has the power. They have to know that subconsciously, but the only way they can cover this up is to increase the noise of their propaganda to balance out the outside world. This is why they need to say Trump and Elon are Nazis, which is obviously not true.
Which is the sole reason why they are freaking out about the US AID being dismantled and, you know, taxes being reduced and eliminated. It's how they fund all of their stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, ready?
We have needed a Department of Government Efficiency for about as long as we've had a government. So
Right. What's hilarious is that Obama started it and he put Biden in charge of it. And the only thing Biden could do was stop the presidential coin from being printed to save 5 million a year. That was his way of his contribution to reducing government spending. And then he stopped there.
Not true. At the same time, they've been doing the propaganda for nearly a decade, and thus they're clearly burning out. When you look at the emotional fervor through which the left tried to propagandize their own supporters in this previous election, and then
Alright, good
after
night,
Trump
guys.
won,
Yep,
you
have a
can
good night.
tell that it lacks the energy of 2020 or 2016. It's also interesting to see the New York Times write an article about Mencius Moldbug, who is a far-right pro-monarchist thinker, and it's not an entirely negative article, and that means to me that parts of the mainstream leftist media are having doubts. And there's this whole conspiracy theory that I'm an acolyte of Mencius Moldbug and I serve his interests, and we've spoken once, which is just, it's people making stuff up. On top of this, it's clear that the left is losing elite support. Elon, Zuckerberg, and Bezos have all left the left, which clearly signals a sea change in the entire tech field. After the latest election, Republicans have complete dominance over the legislature, president, and Supreme Court, or all three branches of the American government. The woke culture and movies have completely failed, while DEI or affirmative action alongside Roe v. Wade have already been knocked down by the rightist-dominated Supreme Court. The right
I try to let him finish the sentence before pausing it, but this one.
I fundamentally think the right has already won the culture war, given the left has tied themselves together with too many suicide clauses inside their ruling ideology to be able to change into something else healthily. Their racial caste politics are too fundamentally un-Western that it's doomed long term. The coalition doesn't even like each other, and they've built up an entire lifetime of hatred among young white men. The left is too stupid, weak, bureaucratic, nihilistic, and suicidal to win.
This is true. They're like I was saying earlier, they're infighting about who has the most victimhood, who's the most oppressed. it's unsustainable. You can't, like, they look like they're a unified front, but as you start to scrutinize that unified front, you'll see cracks in it where in one of the past pictures in this video itself, they were, you have your BLM, and then inside the BLM you have your Black Trans Lives Matter. So the trans community is already encroaching on the original purpose of that group, which was Black Lives Matter. So then, they have to accept that group, otherwise there's infighting. And it's like, that's like a broad, simple example, but there's, you know, um, infighting amongst, like, the LGBT, then you have LGBTQ, LGBTQ plus, then it's all these minor fraction subcategories because they have to drill down deeper. It's all well, I'm LGBT. Oh yeah, well, I'm LGBTQ, and I'm LGBTQ plus. I'm LGBTQ plus IA, and they have to keep doing that one step further because they always have to one up each other.
By the rightist dominated.
Say, I learned a very interesting rule about trauma as a kid, and the first rule of trauma is actually the same rule as the first rule of Fight Club.
Right, you don't
because the more you talk about it, the more talking about it means to some extent you're reliving it. So
right.
It's like that doesn't help you. You have to try to find a way to push forward.
Which also gives way to exposing that a lot of these people don't actually have the things that they say. They're just doing it to be special. Because typically when you have trauma, you don't talk about it. Openly, at least.
Supreme Court. The right has already won the culture war. The question is how long and how bloody does the victory have to be? From my perspective, the left knows that things aren't working. They know that on the current slant, they're going to lose in America. The question at this point is whether they're willing to gradually fade away or they'll fight to the death.
No,
you guys know
I don't think they'll
this
fade
will
away.
end in war, but I completely respect anyone who disagrees as well.
They say they want to fight, but I think what the plan is they're gonna try to sink the ship.
This moment of February 2025. First of all, I was surprised and incorrect that the left gave up this last election with no contention. The last two elections were contested, so I just assumed this one would be. Rightists don't like it when you say this either, but this election was actually still pretty close, and it was not a conservative blowout in pure numeric terms, like rightists pretend it to be. The left could have easily won. It also blows my mind that nearly half of voters still voted for Kamala after seeing social collapse occur before their own very eyes. The thing the left is doing now that I find very scary is they're using rhetoric that makes it very easy for them to escalate to violence. Keep in mind the irony.
That is very true. Whatever the woke left say about the right is whatever they're actually doing. And you can test it. It doesn't fail. And we saw it during the results of the three major trials against Trump. Fani Willis tried to charge Trump and prosecute him on XYZ. Found out later she was guilty of XYZ. Jack Smith, same thing, guilty of what he was trying to charge Trump with. Letitia James accused Trump of overestimating his properties. Tried to charge him as a crime of fraud against or defrauding the bank that loaned him the money. Here she's found now being investigated and being charged with that exact same thing.
Law of woke projection. Every major leftist outlet between BreadTube, the TV stations, and the DNC are calling Elon and Trump's involvement a coup. This seems crazy to me, given the only thing they did was win an election. If the left is already saying the right has launched a coup twice, with the earlier one being J6, it creates an incredibly easy rationalization among their...
So we are just talking about Google. This is a perfect example.
leftist think tank think tank
Leftist
coup.
think tank coup Trump. And this is what comes up.
Yeah. Basically blaming Trump for the thing that they're guilty of.
It's like, I know a lot of people refer to January 6th as an insurrection. But here's something I learned simply as an assistant manager. Basically, I was told the store manager is responsible for the store. You, as the assistant manager, are responsible for the shift. So if something happens on the shift, doesn't matter what it is, they're going to look at me, and I'm ultimately the one responsible. So the fact that that happened on January 6th, and nobody's like, okay, who's in charge of Capitol security? You're fired. Like,
Right.
you fucked up, because that is how responsibility works.
Right. Well, they didn't want to do that because, as we later found out, Pelosi took the blame in her vehicle because she was on recorded taking the blame for it because she did not accept National Guard to be there, and then the Capitol Police were escorting people through, which is actually what they should have done because technically that's the people's property. So yeah, there is restrictions on being in there, but once the gate had been opened by the police officers, then there was no crime because they had removed the barriers and allowed the people to go in. And had it been a real insurrection, people would have been armed.
Yeah, that's something I've mentioned. Like, how do you have an insurrection without guns of any kind?
Right.
What are we watching?
Right now we're watching a video from What If Alt History by Rudyard Lynch, who is a Philadelphia area resident, and he's a historian. He studied anthropology. He's very well versed in things, and uh, he's presenting some facts about how we are getting closer to a civil war and how the left has gone deeply insane and why there's been a fracture and a splinter of conservative um, conservatives and Democrats and independents into the new MAGA group that is trying to stand in opposition of the insanity.
We've been in civil war for the past 4 years.
Right. But
I mean, just no
in a
bullets were fired yet.
right, it's a cold civil war. We haven't gone hot yet.
And the second question is, what's up with the 32nd century fighters? Where did that come from?
Um
Well, I
oh,
have those.
yeah.
I know you have them because you posted it as a screenshot. Where did they come from?
Any 32nd century ship that has a hanger pick. I think there's 3.
And Amia's final verdict on those? I know he doesn't do carrier stuff much, but he does have an opinion that holds a lot of weight on pretty much everything still related.
Everything I've understood lately with carriers is that Type 7s beat everything.
Type 7s are nasty because they do serious debuffs. Your opinion on these 32nd century shuttlecraft?
Barf.
Okay.
Were you guys done reading this?
Yes.
I was actually wrestling peacefully. This is just kind of a side note. Maybe you guys will find some humor out of it. But I'm going to blame Amia. Because Amia had to have talked to my cats. And my cats, who are protesting that they didn't get wet food tonight because they didn't go shopping today, they got dry food instead, decided to get creative and somehow close via slamming a door, which woke me up in pure security mode, and now I can't go back to sleep.
Go Cats.
That's yeah. Uh-huh.
Threadmill, did you get done?
Yes, yes.
followers to do the same. It's also comparable with them calling their enemies Nazis because anything
So
is
I'll be right back.
justified
I'm
to
gonna
fight the
top off my
Nazis.
water.
Also, keep in mind,
Okay.
multiple leftist think tanks have already shadowboxed launching a coup against a Republican victory. Secondly, I see the left actively disobeying Trump's orders illegally. Every single day, I see a new piece of news, which makes it hard for me to keep track of it all, but a federal judge is refusing to carry out Trump's executive orders. Alternately, the DNC is publicly saying that it will shut down the government over Trump's victory. On the lower level, you see so much more stuff with regional governments or state governments actively disobeying orders that Trump's executive office are sending out. Before I release this video, probably at least another dozen examples will happen between the time where I record this and this video goes out. If the DNC is saying it, it's basically orders, since the left follows orders from the DNC in a way that the right doesn't from the GOP. One of my friends likes to say that it's really remarkable to see how much the interests of the Democratic Party are played out around the world. And
Yeah, and that is just sad.
Okay, my third and final question, while I'm still under the protections of the 2-minute rule, because it's a question, not a statement. Jamar, what the hell are you still doing awake? Don't you work tomorrow?
I do, but I wanted to finish the stream.
Hey,
We got
Reddit.
10 more minutes to go.
Right, I haven't even touched on the other videos.
in a way that's not true for other political parties, where you look at America's foreign policy
Yeah.
or the Black Lives Matter in
Okay,
Korea
so
or Britain, and you're
I
seeing
just,
the interests
before
of
I
the
got on
American
there, I read that
Democratic Party
Trump
becoming world-changing
seized
to
Hunter
the
and Ashley
entire
Biden's
global
Secret Service protection
ecosystem. The left has
because
such
he has
a well
18 agents and she's got 13. And he's currently, for a broke person, vacationing in South Africa.
I remember that within a single day of the DNC picking Kamala over Biden, girls on TikTok were making pro-Kamala dances, which we know were paid for by the Democrats. Speaking of social media, the results are horrifying. All over social media, we're seeing leftists literally calling Trump Hitler, and it's not abnormal for completely insane stuff. There's a viral trend of women shaving their hair and entering the 4B, or no involvement with men at all, whether sexually, romantically,
Well, I'd never
etc.,
seen the
to
32nd
protest
century
Trump.
shuttlecraft.
I think to myself, what has the Trump administration actually done for you to swear off the entire male sex?
Was that something
Because
new or
Trump
some
is
shit?
probably one of the least misogynistic rulers in the regime that works with him of any ever in human history. So if Trump's too misogynistic for you, I'm sorry, look at the rest of the human condition. Things get so much worse from here.
Just
There's
cooking
this
up grades
trend
right
called
now.
cute winter boots, basically saying that leftists need to start buying cute winter boots in order to start carrying out terrorism and violence against Trump's America. I find that hilarious.
Today was the
since
first
the
day
most
they actually
feminized
put up
way
tomorrow's new event campaign part that I actually saw, even though you talked about it over the weekend, Emia.
Well, it is on the loading screen.
I didn't see it on the loading screen. That's why I never said anything, because I know you probably couldn't have been wrong. So, keep mouth shut, discover more data before making a comment.
Wise choice.
The military pounded a lot of knowledge into me really well.
Okay, I think I'm gonna move on to this couple of the other things here and touch on it. I think we got through the meat and potatoes of this video. He just goes on to like point out more of the hypocrisy on the left. Let's see.
Could it also be the attempt by certain individuals and factions to rewrite history?
That too. Oh, let's see. There's the swatting issue that's been going on and still going on.
We have a tweet from Cat Turd.
Define
You heard
swatting
it. His
issue.
name is Cat Turd.
People are calling police and SWAT are basically showing up and forcibly removing Trump supporters from their homes over nonsense.
Several
I'm
individuals like Gunther Engelman, Cat Turd. Yeah, there's a whole list of people that are getting swatted. And it's in conjunction with several days ago, Jamie White, who is a independent journalist who works with Alex Jones, was murdered on his front lawn in front of his house. And a couple days later, General Flynn tried to contact Alex Jones personally to relay the message that they discovered that Alex Jones and his InfoWars team were on their hit list, Ukrainian hit list. And now we have an influx of swatting happening now that that's been exposed, where they're trying to get a lot of these right-leaning independent journalists and dissenters of the leftist regime killed by cop. In one instance, like Cat Turd's explaining here, well, no, I don't think he says it in this particular tweet, but a lot of these incidents they're reporting that there is a family being murdered in progress and they must show up quickly to stop loss of life. So they're showing up ready to rock. And
so overly reported, actually lied. The actual police report, probably anonymous,
right,
lied about said thing going on just to get police to show up to get murdered by cops.
right. Which all of this ties into what Rudyard was saying and how I've felt for the last, well, since basically I knew something like this was going to happen when in 2015. Definitely got confirmed in 2016 when Trump, first day in office, they started trying to impeach him. I was like, we're headed towards a civil war.
Definitely 2017 January, but okay.
Right. Oh yeah, 2017. And specifically now you have terrorism, burning of what they coveted as electric vehicles to save the planet because you got to go green. Now they're burning them, and then the swatting and the siding with the killer of the CEO, the the activist judges fighting, like the one that tried to order Trump to have the plane of Tren Aragua killers reverse course and come back to the States.
Yeah, there was even some question this morning in a White House press briefing by a particular CNN news personnel who she'll remain nameless, but she's pretty fucking out there. Um, talking about, well, the verbal order, which preceded the written order, and then Catherine Levitt was like, but the plane was already in the air and outside of U.S. airspace jurisdiction when the written order came down. Well, doesn't the verbal order hold legal weight? Well, that's what the White House legal team is confirming or not. Um, yeah, stupid shit.
Right. Well, technically, he doesn't have jurisdiction over international affairs, which is in the president's power, not the judicial. So, this was an international incident that was set up between two countries that the judge has, especially his level of judiciary stature, has no ability to interfere with.
You realize at the end of Trump's presidency, it's going to come down to who's his replacement. It's going to be an absolute fucking shitstorm because you know damn well Gavin Newsom's trying to run for a 28 run. Um, and something's going to happen to where the straw's going to break the camel's back, and then real bullets are fired.
Right. I think that's going to happen long before then, because we're already teetering on it because of all their funding. Their money laundering rings are being shut down, and it's driving them insane. More insane. They were already insane. Now they're just deeper into levels. And yeah, if especially like if it I think it might happen before the midterms, but definitely going to happen when they lose the midterms, and I'm 99.9% sure they're going to lose the midterms. We're going to gain more seats.
Well, if people, okay, I'm going by the Men in Black premise that is true, that a person is smart but people are stupid line, which is completely true because people follow a crowd, a herd. It's, herding theory that people just fall into. Um, and to boost that, Americans are lazy until something righteously happens to awaken the dragon. Um, and then be prepared to stand by.
Right. Well, I see
Uh,
us. Tim Pool had an analogy that I like. It explains it perfectly. We're like the guy at the bar. We're sitting there grumbling to ourselves, drinking our beer, minding our own business, while the left is this group over there being loud and obnoxious and causing a ruckus over in the corner of the bar. And our buddy's like, "Hey, look at that ruckus," and we're just like, "Don't want to deal with it. Just want to drink my beer. They're not bothering me right now. I'm just gonna ignore them." And then the left see that guy sitting at the bar minding his own business, and it bothers them, so they go over and they start something with the guy at the bar, unbeknownst to them that the guy at the bar is ready to fight and can handle himself, and so they keep nagging him until he gets up and punches their lights out. That's where we're at. They're coming over to bug us, and we've had enough. And like I said, the approval rating of the Democrat Party right now is in like the mid 20s, maybe 29%,
lower,
23%.
more towards 20.
So,
It's dismally low and dropping,
right,
and comments by Schumer and AOC are not really helping the mix.
right.
They keep doubling, tripling down on absolute garbage. Um, and Hakeem Jeffries, I mean, God, that guy is a
Yeah, he's a
walking
tool.
poster child for um, abortion. Um, the stupidity just because they don't want to lose their power and money, not necessarily in that order.
Right. But they're losing both because of like
And Trump's doing it legally.
right,
And they can't swallow that.
right. So when they come up to the 26 midterms and realize they're in a world of hurt, they're going to be backed into a corner. That will be when they're backed into the proverbial corner, because they're already defunded. They have to use their coffers that they tried to fill up before Trump got in, knowing that Trump's getting in, he's going to cut off our money. And then when they realized, when it became reality, they was actually finding all of their money laundering schemes and cutting them off. Now they're like, oh man, now this is the money we have. We can't refill it right now, and we have to use it to tread water where we're at, and we can't like before in 2020. Who's funding the pallets of bricks laying out there, or the box trucks with all kinds of various not really weapons, but stuff that they were using, pre-printed signs, um, the water bottles and stuff like that. Like who is funding that? Well, now you won't have that. Who's bailing out the people that are getting arrested for the terrorism? You ain't gonna have that now because there's no funding for it. It's been stopped. So like they're in desperation mode to the point now that when 2026 midterms happen and they're backed into the corner, that's a 99% certainty that shit's gonna start then. Just sheer desperation.
Okay. Being backed into a corner, yeah. They're already feeling it now. We're into the first 2 months of his presidency, and things are going this way. We
Right.
have to understand that change, after all this fat spending, going to lean so we can get rid of the fucking deficit, and they've talked about it for decades to do, is going to hurt. Change hurts.
Right.
Change is just that, change. Um, and this is generally definitely for the better. They are definitively very open about everything that they are doing. They're just not saying the specific methodology of how they're going to accomplish it. So the left is in panic mode. It's going to be um, the straw, in my opinion, is going to be um, either an extreme closely near miss or a successful assassination of Trump. That's the straw.
Right. Well, they already had two
We go
incidents.
this far and no farther is a good Stowe reference. Um, we got to look at, Hollywood did say some things and do some things that were right and were trying to pre-warn us. At least some directors were, that actually got it out there. Um, sorry, man.
Well, like I was saying, there was two incidents already where a guy got into the same room as Trump with a firearm that was not part of Secret Service. And
That's going to be their reasoning out. Let's just take him out, because once you chop the head off the chicken, the body will die. Type methodology. Um, they don't understand that old methods aren't working. They can be effective, but they're not working anymore. They need to change up their game. That does not mean doubling and tripling down on their bullshit. It means changing it.
right.
So yeah.
They don't realize that we are not like them. We are independent thinkers, but have a united goal. So if they take Trump out, we'll just unite and retaliate.
They know that, but they think that they can control the narrative.
Right.
Okay. Because um, otherwise they wouldn't do it or even try it, knowing that you can never kill a martyr. Okay. Once that happens, it solidifies shit. They know all of that. They will stupidly try because they are believing in their entitlement and arrogance.
Right. Same thing with Elon. There's been multiple threats against him, multiple attempts, and yeah. So
Yeah,
we are
Elon just rescued the fucking ISS astronauts that were trapped up there for the past 9 months because the Biden administration didn't want to give Trump a win through Musk sending up SpaceX to get them down.
Right.
That's what came out today. It was like, what?
Yeah.
We all kind of knew it, but then it's said out loud, and it's like on national TV, and it's like, holy shit, okay. Gloves are coming off.
Yeah. We're inching closer. And his plan, like April 2nd is when reciprocal tariffs kick in. And then shortly after that, once they get the deficit under control, which they are very near close to doing, once they get that done, then they're going to try to do that elimination of tax for anyone earning less than 150K a year. That's huge. And
Very
they
huge.
know that if that goes into effect, like what if they really have nothing to run on as it is, other than undoing all of the things that have already been done. Like they're going to run on what, raising your taxes, starting taxation up again, using your tax money to fund things that don't benefit you. I mean, what are you really going to run on? What did the Democrats have as a message? They don't even have a leader. So, like, they are in real dire straits and wounded, and they are very dangerous. I mean, as far as like getting started on a conflict, not as far as actually being able to win that conflict, but as far as
They don't see that.
right,
So that's the problem with the entitlement. They don't see that. They believe that it's like releasing a viral agent onto the country, believing that they can control said viral agent, not realizing, even though they've been told that viral agents mutate and adapt and evolve like every other thing in life. No, 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 we can control it. No, 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 that's okay. We can control it. That's the arrogance of their entitlement.
right. It's going to be crazy. It's going to get more crazy. And then, like, I know that they're not going to want to let, because the plan was in 2026 to celebrate um, America's anniversary and uh, all of the golden age. There was supposed to be an entire year starting, I think, on July 4th, all the way until 27, July 4th, 2027. There's supposed to be a year of um, fairs and um, just a bunch of celebrations throughout the year. Uh, I know they're not going to want to do that because that's going to just, I mean, Trump's approval rating is already better than it's been in ever and rising. Like that'll just put it over the top to go into
Every
2026.
time Trump is successful, hurts them in ways they cannot even begin to calculate.
Right.
So if you take a year, 2 years, all the way up to his full term of all these successes and what we will be at the end of that, they can't stomach it. I cannot believe and fathom that the former mayor of a cesspool city that used to be a great city turned lieutenant governor and governor, Newsom, is thinking about running for president after what he did to California
Right.
and fully believes that his state should lead the way in what they've done. And I'm like, what? I can't believe there's logic there. Um, yeah, I just, mm,
Wasn't California at the forefront of all this inflation bullshit?
yes. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's the arrogance of their entitlement
Mhm.
that blows my mind, thinking that Newsom has done such a good job that the fire that happened was like Lahaina. It was just clearing up the old so they can reevaluate, buy out at cheap, and rebuild into something better. I mean,
Right.
say what?
It
Uh,
does. It seems very suspiciously like a land grab.
they had already talked about it. There was a tape of Newsom interview where he had already had people looking and projecting all of this. So let's make the money cuts. So we don't have the staffing, and let's do all these other things to make the cuts to where, I mean, you got to look at some conspiracy theories as, okay, they're pretty fucking out there, but holy shit, if in the end they don't turn out to be true. Case in point, 2017. They spied on my campaign. Oh, you're fucking lying. Oh my God. Conspiracy theorist. Up one side, down the other. How many times did he call out shit to be correctly the shit it was? But the media trying to change the narrative and control it, hide it, derail it for later to be true.
Right.
COVID, let's wear masks. Oh, Fauci's always right. Trump avoided him after a while for a reason. Eh, I'm not saying Trump is God and Trump is the perfect political candidate. He's not, but he is the best that we've got, and he's probably the the most needed right now because you got to have somebody with the balls to put their life on the line to make these changes to stop all this shit so we don't go back so we get out of the lord fiefdom that uh it was turned into.
Yeah. What people don't realize is over 100 years they've normalized us being oppressed by taxation and bureaucracy. And when we actually get to feel the freedom of not being under that thumb, it's over. They're done permanently. They're never going to be able to go back. Well, I wouldn't say never, but it's going to be a long, long, long time. At least as long as it has been from the time of the Civil War to now to get back to that. If
When somebody told me once that the United States got so wealthy because it didn't tax its citizens. I'm like, oh, that's a foreign thought. Where is this coming from? And then I looked it up and I found out that, yeah, we never really had income tax until after the Great Depression um, to help get us back on our feet. This was a temporary solution that turned into permanent and then became a cash cow for certain agencies and individuals and their
right,
families. I had to look that up and go, wow, that is true. Fuck me.
right, that's what they're freaking out about is that power that they've had for so long is now being destroyed. And it's like their whole life is being taken from them.
Well, they failed to follow the rules of history lesson, um, and in doing so, you failed to repeat it. But if you don't learn from history and what it taught you, you're doomed to repeat. The bottom line of that. Um, they believe that you can control the narrative, and it works out for so long. But the overriding one, we are a country of insurrectionists. We are a country that was born of the spark of insurrection. Um, because that's what we did
Right,
with King George V. We had enough. We tried all the diplomatic routes, and finally we had to go to war, um, which was insurrection against our ruling body at the time. We're willing to do that. We united together in World War One and then World War Two under some atrocities done. And when it hit home with Pearl Harbor, uh, apparently even Hitler thought that was a bad idea. Um, you, you got to look at the dragon that can come out with
mm,
when Americans have had enough. Be prepared to stand by, and that's what's happening. And yeah, it's been built boiling up for a while. So
yeah. And I think it's necessary because we've had 200 plus years of peace because of the first conflict that started it, and now it's gotten to a point because there's so many generations out that people forgot and they need reminded.
don't want to hear Jefferson's shaking tree of liberty shit. How true the statement is, yes. Okay, and Jefferson's also statement of um, you have tyranny when the people fear the government. You have freedom when the government fears the people.
Right.
He said that too. That's a paraphrase, but it rings true to home.
Yeah.
Not too far of a paraphrase,
And
but
the government got it bloated because of the last 100 years of taxation and stopped fearing the people. It's the same saying as uh, strong men bring peace, peace brings weak men bring chaos, and then the chaos brings a need for strong men. It's a cycle.
time to break the cycle. I've said this for decades now. Because the country I volunteered to serve and give my life up for, it's not that country. We have veered so far away from that I don't recognize the U.S.
Right.
But I'm not a person like some former Hollywood celebrities that actually left the U.S. because Trump became president. Wow. Okay. Uh,
Yeah, that shows their
Who
fortitude.
did that? Who actually did that?
Rosie
Rosie
O'Donnell,
O'Donnell.
Ellen DeGeneres, several
Oh,
others.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. There are a couple, right?
No, they're
Let
not
me
a
go.
couple, but
Oh, I thought they were.
no.
No, Ellen's with some. I don't know who she's with. I don't really pay
Oh,
attention
she's
to.
was. Oh, okay.
I don't pay
They
attention to her
were.
personal life that
There
much.
were there were other celebrities in quotes
Right.
that have left, will leave, are in the process of leaving the U.S. Um, because they know their jig is up, but they can't. Plus, they don't want to stick around, so it doesn't. It defect directly and definitively shows their lack of fortitude and how
I
they
mean,
should not be listened to.
I
I
had a
mean, I
theory
don't.
about.
4 years, he's not president anymore. What's it like?
Well, that's the thing. Because of their doubling down and refusal, like even in Rudger's video, he proved that they can't. They know there's something wrong with their party's agenda and stance, but they are unwilling to give it up because of the grift or because of whatever reason. They are unable to release that and change their mindset and change what they stand on, even though they know it's killing them. And I had a theory. Rosie O'Donnell was really huge in the Nickelodeon scene right around the time of that. I forget who the other guy is that's being accused of inappropriately being sexualizing the Nickelodeon kids. Um, with this Diddy thing and the Epstein list potentially coming out, I fully believe, in my opinion, Rosie O'Donnell fled because of that. Because she's
He
in
went
on
to
it.
Ireland.
Yeah.
Okay, uh, if he thinks that Irish people won't give her the fuck up, she's got another thing coming.
Oh yeah, they'll throw her on a fucking raft and send her over if they have to.
Uh huh. And if she makes it, then she can face her justice.
Right.
Yeah, hence the big word in there, if.
Right. There might be a few heavy stones in that raft.
No, the raft's going to be dragging some chum. Okay. Okay.
Well, I remember when they went after Kim.com, who was running Mega Upload because he was in Australia, and then he made bail and fled to New Zealand. And I think we're still trying to negotiate an extradition treaty with them to try to get him.
Yeah, New Zealand's nutty. Sorry to say, it is.
A
But
lot of people can say that about the U.S. as well. Okay. I mean, but there is one thing about the U.S. that um, a land of dreamers that can turn a dream into reality. That's a very powerful thing. Um, I'm not going to say Einstein because he was a import from Germany, even though brilliant, but Franklin, fucking brilliant guy, thought out of the box. That's what is required. So you're not insane, and you're not holier than thou moral. You're right down the fucking middle. You're just thinking outside the box because understanding the definition of stupidity and still going into that is what we don't want and or need. We need to be thinking out of the box for our future, not just as a country, but as a planet. Shit's just coming.
Right. So it'll be an interesting next um 2-3 years for sure.
Oh,
But
If we go into a civil war with actual shooting, that's something you don't ever want to be a part of and or see. Uh, it's not. It's really not pretty. Combat, battle, war. It's not pretty. I don't care what pictures they show you about Ukraine. Um, what was one of the chief reasoning why Putin did what he did to Ukraine? Not just because he wanted to coalesce the actual Russian territories back in again under one unified Russia. Um, there was a military organization that is still in existence, even though everything else has been decimated in Ukraine, that their methodology and operational way of doing things was exactly what the Nazis did in World War II. I'm talking SS Nazis. And some of their unit banners are pretty reminiscent of that. And then you look at, okay, I really can't say enough about Zelensky's attire coming over as a foreign leader, coming over the way he dresses, seeing as how we have a senator in a hoodie and shorts.
right. Make no mistake, I understand what it would mean to go to civil war, but the reason why I might sound um, enthusiastic about it is because it
That right there tells me you don't truly understand. I'm sorry, I've been in combat, literally, real combat. Okay. You don't ever want that. If you have a choice, you don't ever want that. Not in any way, shape, or meaning of the phrasing of any words.
it's worse to not have it at this point because then you
Then we
capitulate.
have, as a people, as a race, we have to grow the fuck up and not be so fucking combative. We have to break away from that. That is our greatest final frontier,
If
changing
that
our
were
very
possible.
nature.
But the problem is the sanity is at risk of being destroyed by the insanity, and you cannot allow that by any means. It means
And I will say
embracing.
it again, Americans are lazy. They have accepted this for a very long time. Okay. What happened to me in special forces? I was ordered to do some things that morally didn't sit right with me, but those were my fucking orders.
Right.
So when I questioned them after the op, I began to make waves. They don't like waves. Do as you're told, not as we fucking do. That never sat right with me. I left the special forces no matter how much money they offered to throw at me to re-up. It
The difference with this is it's not following orders, it's fighting for freedom, fighting for sanity, fighting to protect the families. That's why I'm
they started breaking
enthusiastic
up the
about it.
nuclear family in the 60s.
I
Why do you
mean,
think they did what they did um,
yeah,
with African Americans? They
right.
yeah.
broke up that right there, which put more crime because they were going to, the guys turned to crime, and well, we're going to offer welfare. They gave them an out. Americans will take the dollar before they will take freedom, even though the dollar is
Mhm.
worthless.
Yep. Sure will.
Right. But when
You know,
the
everything.
fire is at your doorstep, you have a choice: sit
Well, yeah.
and let it engulf you, or fight to the death to prevent it.
At that point, it's already too late. You've already lost because now you're at a fight or flight situation. You have to recognize well beforehand that this is going to happen. And if you don't take action and steps prior to that point, you're eventually going to be left with a couple choices that you don't fucking like.
Right. Well, we have a side that's sane and rational, and a side that isn't sane or rational. You can't negotiate with insane and irrational. It's
Yes, you
impossible.
can.
No,
I
they
don't.
You
don't
give
believe
them
in
the
the
same
reality that you do. It's
you
impossible.
give them the same fucking choice as the fire scenario you just stated less than 5 minutes ago. You give them that same choice. Let them make their choice, and then you can back away knowing that you gave them a choice that they would have given you. But basically, it's feeding them their own bullshit. And yeah, you live in the same world that I do. Um, I just have different experiences than you. That's all.
No, I was talking about them not living in our same reality, because that's
Oh, they
not
live
how.
in the same reality. They understand that if you control the narrative, history is taught one thing: victors write history. They choose to tell us what is going to be taught for the future. Okay. So they began changing the narrative slowly over the past decades. I know this is a fact because my son, I was taught some things in it about history that my son was never taught ever, and it was never even brushed upon. Chief among them is how it used to be taught that America is the second Roman Empire. We are glorious, we are all powerful, we are really something to behold. But if history teaches the lesson of what happened to Rome, it died from within because the senators got too fat, like they are, got used to their power and their money, like they did, and like they
Yep.
are. They stopped teaching that because that gave a specific reminder of, hey, we don't want you to look at this because we want to achieve all of that and just have you as our slaves, effectively. When they weren't teaching how the Roman Empire fell, I knew there was a problem. I mean, it's been wiped out from history books. Bad.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
Is it really? That is
That
not
Yes.
okay.
when I was in school, and this was something that perplexed me, and I'll basically cement what Max has already said. They went on this whole tangent
It's
about the Roman
insane.
Empire, how great they were, how far they expanded on the Atlas, the fact that they
Mhm.
existed for 800 years,
Yeah.
but they never taught me how they fell. They
Right.
just completely glossed over that. And I was just like, how? How do you go from, an 800-year kingdom spanning most of the known world at the time to gone? But,
They
And my
impo-
son didn't even get that.
yeah.
They glossed over this was the era of the Roman Empire. That was it. That was all. Learn how to take the test, learn how to pass the test because we want the federal funding for you passing tests. That's what he was taught
Yeah.
until I found out and started teaching him things that I had learned, not from
Yeah.
a specific point of view, but from a neutral point of view, giving both the good and the bad on every topic, because you have to have that in order to have positive understanding and make your choice about the neutral data given. If you don't have any of that, then you are being controlled. It's a psyop. And I was in psyops. That's what I did in the fucking army. Okay, second group out of Bragg. Okay, the military, the government taught me how to manipulate people into doing things that I wanted them to do. I was good at it. I worked with the translators. Um, but that is fucking evil. It is so fucking evil.
Yeah. I grew up in a military family, all branches, and they drilled it into my head. My dad, my uncles, my older brothers, and they didn't want me mixed up in it.
Because how do you truly, when a soldier, Reacher was correct. There are 4 types of people that go in the military. Okay. You can control 2 out of the 4. The other 2, okay, you can control at least one of them. But the main chief one, doing it because of patriotism, of wanting to do something greater than yourself. Those people, how do you control them? How do you eliminate them? Because when we have a war, and they thought about this, because you have to look at it from an outside perspective, they knew that the war would be coming sooner rather than later. Those veterans would be the teachers, okay, of how to effectively fight and win said conflict. How do you get rid of them? Well, you neuter the fucking VA hospitals. You neuter everything, the benefits that we promised them
Right.
to.
To let them
Okay,
die.
you neuter all that, and you let them die off quick. All of these things are not hyperbole. Um, they're not conspiracy theory. They are fact. You got to look at what they've been doing to the budgets of these agencies and the care in which they've eroded away gradually, slowly, so they could have power, control, and have the money, the wealth.
Right.
You might not like some of the things that I say. That's great, fine. Everybody, and I might not like some of the things you say, but we're both guaranteed that under the First Amendment. Guaranteed. I don't have to like what you say, but I have to respect the part where you have the right to say it. Political speech should not be covered under the First Amendment. Should not be. You can't get up there as a celebrity and say, I dreamt about killing Donald Trump and get away with it. You can't get up there as political speech as an elected politician and say, Supreme Court justices, you're under notice because we don't like what you said and did.
Right.
There's going to be hell to pay. That is a directive threat. And they get away with it because it's political speech.
Well,
Politicians who are elected are hired through an election process as servants of the government. Okay, not to become more wealthy from it. See, there's a thing called a GS pay. It's called government salary. Okay, but anybody in the government and the defense industry knows that GS means government slave pay. GS salary. Okay, that's what we perverted it into, just calling it that. But it's GS, government salary levels. But it's the government slave pay. So yeah, and those things I had to learn the hard way.
well, this was a good streaming session. Um, had a lot of good discussion. I think I need to
And
get
you're
to
but
bed.
you're late for bed. Hence my one of my original points when I came on about an hour ago, a little less, but like, what the fuck are you still doing here? Normally you're gone at or before me. Now, obviously I went early tonight because I was just feeling kind of tired. Why? Because decorating those fucking bases, however nice and necessary, takes up a lot of mental energy and makes one tired.
Right.
So to my point, I will not fucking decorate your league hall. No, I did it to mine. You can do it to yours. It's a do you have to pay all by your own.
I am leaving it the way it is. I really don't care if it's decorated. I decorated my base. That's as far as I'm going.
Rated bases, under themes. Yeah, okay, cool. Kind of go with the theme, stick with it. I like themes. It keeps everything neat, organized. I can function that way a little bit. And then doing all that uh, Leprechaun St. Patrick's Day stuff, going to all these other bases. right? All these other league halls and doing it. Okay, yeah, some of the furniture and everything got in the way. It gets destroyed and it comes back, not a problem. And then went to the Myrmidons one, and it was like the best thing about that fucking thing was the huge ass fucking Irish pub in the main front by the big ass windows. Um, it was huge and it was nice. And I did a lot of time decorating it, you know. So if you ever looked at bars and pubs, and it was a lot of mahogany with some entertainment. Yeah. Mhm. That was the nicest thing about the fucking base. The rest, it was pretty open in the corridors. You could get to the stuff, do the thing really fast, but it lacked a feel. So I gave it a feel.
All right, fellas. I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good night.
But not for long,
Oh,
because
yeah.
he's gonna uh have to sleep in and re-rest tomorrow night for as late staying up he did tonight.
And we'll see how I feel.
AM period that he did with Amia before, but hey, night guy.
Cool.
Night.
Ever wondered how
Later.
to bind keyboard keys to your gamepad buttons? The answer
And
lies
they
within
call
a
him
nifty
Tater
tool
Shot.
called XPad One, available from the Microsoft Store. With this clever piece of software, you can not only bind your keyboard keys to gamepad buttons, but also control your mouse with the analog sticks. To kick things off, you'll need to create a game profile. This may sound technical, but it's as easy as pressing two buttons at the same time. Within any game, press the guide button and the start menu button simultaneously. Voila! You've just created a game profile. Now, the real magic begins. It's time to bind a keyboard key. The process is straightforward. Press and hold the guide button for 2.5 seconds. Don't worry about timing it perfectly because you'll hear a prompt. Next, press the desired keyboard key you want to bind to the selected gamepad button. And that's it. You've successfully bound a keyboard key to a gamepad button. If during the key binding you change your mind, after you have selected a gamepad button, you can press a different gamepad button and bind to the newly chosen button instead. At any time during the key bind process, you can cancel the key binding by simply pressing the selected gamepad button a second time, or press it twice if you have only started the binding process and have not selected a button yet. But remember, practice makes perfect. The more you use XPad One, the more intuitive it becomes. This software is designed to be easy to use but also powerful, giving you the ability to customize your gaming experience to suit your playstyle. So, why not give XPad One a whirl? It's a game changer, quite literally. Whether you're a seasoned gamer looking to switch things up, or a newbie trying to find your footing, this tool can make a world of difference. Bind your keyboard keys to your gamepad buttons, control your mouse with the analog sticks, and take your gaming to the next level. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Dive in, experiment, and see what XPad One can do for you. After all, the only limit is your imagination.